Hello, and welcome to my Part 1 tutorial on the relationship of primary chord movements. I should point out right off the top that if you're not familiar with the term tritones, that you go up onto my website, click on tutorials, and you'll find Understanding Tritones. On the same token, if you're not familiar with major 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13th chords, I have tutorials in the same location as well. Okay, without any further ado, let's check this out. So where do all the chords come from? Well, they come from modes. We're going to look at the Ionian mode today, which is basically our major scale. We'll look at C, and we know that C is all the white notes on the piano. If you were singing that, you'd probably say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. We tend to just number them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, starting all over again. We can also build chords on each one of those numbers. We would call this a 1 chord, a 2 chord, a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. Notice that the scale of C only has white notes, so therefore the chords that I use only have white notes as well. They are all diatonic, in other words, only using notes found in the scale will show up in the chords. If I were to start on a black note, let's say E flat, the scale of E flat major has 3 flats. That has an E flat, an A flat, a B flat. And again, these 3 flats are obviously going to show up in my chords. So here we go. A 1 chord, a 2 chord, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. We can also come to a conclusion here that, let's use F as my example. F has 1 flat in it. All 1 chords are going to be major. All 2 and 3 chords will be minor. All 4 and 5 chords will be major. The 6th chord will be minor. And the 7th chord, well, it's not major and it's not minor. How about diminished? So all 7 chords will be diminished back to the 1 chord. Let's go back to the scale of C. So our primary chords are the major chords found in the scale. So our 1 chord, our 4 chord, and the 5 chord are all major. These are the chords I'm going to be concentrating on. Let's look at the tonic chord. In this case, C major. Okay, the tonic chord, the best way I could describe that is the father figure. It's a stabilizer. All chords report to it and come to rest in a happy ending, hopefully, such as everything comes to rest on the tonic chord. It's a stabilizing factor. So let's take a look at the 5 chord. There's my 5 chord, but it's very seldom played only as a 3-note chord. It's very important that the other chords are only 3-note chords, that the 7th is added to the 5 chord. Why? Because the 7th, again, a note part of the scale, creates the tritone between the 3rd and the 7th, which gives it energy and wants it to resolve back to the tonic chord. So we get this kind of feeling. So the 5 chord is a pushy type dominant chord, and it pushes back to the tonic. Even if I invert the tritone and I put the 3rd up here, the 7th will still fall to the 3rd of the 1 chord, the tonic chord, and the 3rd of the 5 chord will become a leading tone into the tonic of the 1 chord, as in. Sometimes a 7th can be added contrapuntally, meaning that it can come in after the fact, as long as it gets in there. Five chords tend to also use suspensions to create movement. Almost the same idea as adding a contrapuntally, but taking your 5 chord, put the 7th here, they'll raise the 3rd up to the 4th. Again, only notes used out of the scale. Let it resolve. And they can be used in conjunction with the contrapuntal 7th. Here I have a 5 chord, just with a sus, resolving it, contrapuntal 7th, and arriving. Can we expand the primary and secondary chords without changing the status of their number placement? Absolutely. If I take my 1 chord, in this case C, and I can turn it into a 4-note chord by adding a 6 or a major 7. Cannot, of course, add the B flat because that's not part of the scale. But any of these two notes will not change the status that it is still indeed a 1 chord. In fact, I can expand it out to a 5-note chord by adding the 9. So the 9 is supported with the major 7th, or I could do a 9-6 and have it supported by the substitute of the major 7, the 6. Can't really expand it out to the 11th because of the conflict of the 3rd. And you have to remember that an 11th and a 4th are the same note. 4ths are sus, they're kind of a tension destabilizing factor, the last thing you want on a 1 or a 4 chord. So we do not use an 11th on 1 and 4 chords. But the 13th is certainly available. The 13 is the same note as a 6, so it would have to be supported with a major 7 and a 9. And it would work out quite nicely, and that's used a lot. One song that comes to mind is the Barbra Streisand song Memory. You can be assured that the arranger did not start with a 1 chord with an added 6 and go from there to a 3 chord. More than likely he started with a major 13 to a 3 chord. So you can expand everything out to a 13th without changing the fact that it is still a 1 chord. The 4 chord is identical to the 1 chord in the same respects that you can either add a 6 or a major 7, there's my 4-note chord, expand it out to a 9 or a 9-6, not the 11th, but certainly up to the 13th. The 5 chord, oh, it can be extended right out using pretty well everything. We can use the 7. Of course, we do that anyway because we need the tritone, but certainly added a 9th. If I add the 11th, of course, I pull the 3rd out, and that expands that chord out, and right out to a 13-11 or a 13. All fair game without changing the fact that that is a 5 chord. One last point on this matter is that I'd like to point out that 5 chords are usually one up from everything else. For example, if I'm only using triads on my 1 and 4 chord, we already know that the 5 chord will be a 4-note chord because of the need of the tritone. If I decide to expand my 1 and my 4 chords out to a 4-note chord, say a major 7 or a 6, as in 4 chord, major 7. When I go to the 5 chord, more than likely I'm going to be adding a 9 or up here. So the 5 chord again will have a little bit more than all the other chords. If I take my 1 and 4 chord out to a 5-note chord, a major 9, my 5 chord more than likely will be an 11 or a 13. Definitely you can expand these chords up to a 13th without changing the status, providing the notes that you use come directly from the scale. So now you have our primary chords 1, 4, and 5. In part 2, let's find out how they all interact with each other. Let's go to part 2 and we'll finish it up.